You know that feeling when you're just sitting at your desk, minding your own business, trying to get through another mundane Tuesday afternoon, and suddenly you hear something that makes your blood pressure spike? That was me today. I was literally in the middle of answering emails, the kind of soul-crushing administrative work that makes you question all your life choices, when I heard my male coworker Jake and my male manager Derek talking in the cubicle next to mine. And listen, I'm not usually one to eavesdrop, but their voices carried, and what I heard made me stop mid-keystroke. They were deep in conversation about the male loneliness epidemic. Now, I'm not saying that's not a valid topic, but the direction they were taking it was something else. I heard Derek say something about how brutally hard men have it on dating apps, and Jake was nodding along, adding his own commentary about how the system is rigged against average guys. They were painting this picture of dating apps as these hostile wastelands where good men go to die, rejected by shallow women who only swipe right on male models and millionaires. I should have kept my mouth shut. I really should have. I should have just gone back to my emails and let them have their little pity party. But I couldn't help myself. Something in me snapped, and before I knew it, I was swiveling my chair around and leaning over the cubicle wall. You think women have an easy time on dating apps? I asked, probably with more edge in my voice than was professionally appropriate. They both turned to look at me, and I could see this moment of hesitation in their eyes, like they were calculating whether they really wanted to have this conversation with me. But then Derek, my manager, doubled down. He actually said, and I quote, that men were unequivocally oppressed on dating apps. Jake nodded emphatically, adding that women basically held all the power and could afford to be impossibly picky while men had to grovel for scraps of attention. Now, let me paint you a picture of my Tinder experience. I'd been on the app for about 3 months at this point, and it had been, to put it mildly, a nightmare. I'm not saying I'm some supermodel, but I'm a reasonably attractive woman with a decent job, hobbies, and what I thought was a pretty nice profile. Photos of me hiking, at my friend's wedding, smiling with my dog. A bio that mentioned my love of books and cooking and terrible puns. Nothing that screamed desperate or crazy. And the matches I got. Oh boy. Let me tell you about the matches. So in that moment, standing there in my business casual outfit, looking at these two men who genuinely believed that women were just cruelly rejecting perfectly good guys for no reason, I made a decision. It was impulsive. It was unprofessional. It was probably against several HR policies. But I did it anyway. I pulled out my phone, opened up my Tinder app, and walked over to their cubicle. I handed my phone to Derek and said, "You have 10 minutes to scroll through these oppressed men and find me one that you think would make a suitable partner." The look on his face was priceless. It was this mixture of confusion and sudden realization that maybe he'd stepped into something. Jake leaned in, curious now, and they both started scrolling. The silence that followed was absolutely golden. I stood there, arms crossed, watching their faces as they began their journey through the hellscape that was my Tinder inbox. And let me tell you, their expressions were everything I could have hoped for. The first few swipes were quiet. I could see their eyes widening slightly, but they weren't saying anything yet. Then Jake made this kind of strangled noise and said, "Why is he holding a gun to his head?" I leaned over to look, even though I knew exactly which profile he was talking about. It was the guy whose main photo showed him pointing a handgun at his own temple with this weird smirk on his face. His bio said something about being too wild for most girls and how he was looking for someone who could handle his dark side. That's creative, right? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Really makes you want to swipe right. They kept scrolling. Derek's eyebrows were climbing higher and higher on his forehead with each profile. Then he stopped and just stared at the screen for a long moment. "Why is he naked?" he finally asked, his voice strangled. That's a good question, I replied cheerfully. I ask myself that every day. But wait, keep scrolling. It gets better. And it did get better. Or worse, depending on your perspective. The next profile that made them stop was the guy whose main photo showed him in what was very clearly a romantic embrace with another woman. Not just standing next to a woman at a party or something ambiguous. Full-on kissing another woman, or at least that's what it looked like from the angle. Is he being intimate with another woman in this picture? Derek asked, And I could hear the disbelief in his voice. The answer is yes, I confirmed. His bio says he's ethically non-monogamous but doesn't mention whether his current girlfriend knows he's on Tinder. That's profile number 23, by the way. We have at least 100 more to go. Jake was shaking his head now, scrolling faster, but somehow it just kept getting worse. There was the guy whose photos were all dark, grainy selfies taken from below, making him look like some kind of sleep paralysis demon. His bio was just a series of height requirements for women and a list of physical features he found acceptable. There was the guy who had clearly taken all his photos in the same dirty bathroom mirror, and you could see behind him a collection of what looked like unwashed dishes stacked on every surface. Mountains of them. Crusty plates and bowls that might have been there since the previous decade. Do you think he showers? Derek asked, staring at this particular profile. Answer is probably not, I said. But look closer at photo 3. See that cup on the dresser behind him? They zoomed in, and Jake actually recoiled. Is that mold? There is a moldy Starbucks drink behind him, I confirmed. That's a Frappuccino cup, and judging by the color of what's growing in it, I'd say it's been there for at least 3 weeks. Maybe a month. The scrolling continued. There were shirtless bathroom selfies where you could see the toilet in the background, complete with the seat up. There were gym photos that were just close-ups of sweaty muscles with captions like "This could be yours." There were photos clearly taken at strip clubs or parties that looked like they'd gotten way out of hand. There were bios that were just lists of demands, or worse, sexual propositions right there in the bio before you even matched. 1. Guy's entire profile was 6 photos of his car. Just the car. No pictures of him at all. His bio said, "If you can't handle me at my poorest, you don't deserve me at my richest," which was ironic given that he was literally using his car as his entire personality. Another guy had 5 photos of himself holding different fish. Just fish. His bio was completely blank except for his height and the phrase "no drama." There was the guy whose bio was an entire manifesto about how women today don't know how to be feminine anymore and need to get back in the kitchen. His main photo showed him scowling at the camera with his arms crossed. Jake was laughing now, but it was that uncomfortable laugh you do when something is so absurd you don't know how else to react. Derek just looked increasingly disturbed, like he was having some kind of existential crisis about his entire gender. "Keep going," I encouraged them. "You've got 6 minutes left. Surely there's one good guy in here, right? One guy who's being unequivocally oppressed by my cruel, shallow standards." They kept scrolling with renewed determination, like they were on some kind of mission now. Through the gym bros with their inspirational quotes about grinding and Sigma males. Through the guys whose entire personality seemed to be watching The Office and hiking. Through the crypto enthusiasts and the entrepreneurs who definitely had MLM schemes to pitch. Through the men whose idea of a conversation starter was to comment on physical attributes in ways that would make a Victorian lady faint. And then, finally, they stopped. "This guy," Derek said, sounding almost triumphant. "This guy looks normal." I leaned in to look. And you know what? He was right. This guy actually did look normal. Nice smile, clean-shaven, wearing an actual shirt that wasn't stained or wrinkled. His photos showed him at what looked like a family barbecue, standing in front of some mountains on a hiking trip, and one photo with a golden retriever. His bio was generic but inoffensive, something about enjoying good food, better company, and Sunday morning coffee. No red flags. No guns. No naked photos. No women being intimate with him in the background. No moldy beverages. "See," Derek said, pointing at the screen. "There are good guys on here. You just have to give them a chance." I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Okay," I said. "Let's give him a chance." I took my phone back and swiped right. It was an instant match, which meant he'd already swiped right on me. The little "it's a match" animation popped up with its cheerful celebration sound, and my Tinder inbox opened up. "Now we wait and see what this perfectly normal, non-oppressed man has to say," I announced. We didn't have to wait long. Maybe 10 minutes, which I spent mostly standing there with Derek and Jake, all 3 of us staring at my phone like it was about to reveal the meaning of life. The office around us had gone quiet. A few other coworkers had noticed our weird huddle and were pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. Then my phone buzzed. A new message. I opened it, turned the phone toward them, and let them read it for themselves. The message, in its entirety, was, "You gon' let me fuck?" The silence that followed was deafening. Derek's face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Jake actually put his head in his hands. I just stood there, vindicated, letting them absorb what they were seeing. "That's..." Derek started, then stopped, clearly struggling to find words. "That's your normal guy," I finished for him. "That's the one you picked out of hundreds. The one who looked clean and had no guns in his photos and seemed like a decent human being. And his opening line is 'You gon' let me fuck?'" I took a screenshot before they could say anything else. Evidence for posterity. And maybe for HR if this whole thing blew up in my face later. Jake was shaking his head slowly. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "I genuinely had no idea it was like this." "Most men don't," I said, and I tried to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Because you've never had to experience it. You think dating apps are hard because you don't get enough matches or women don't respond to your messages. But you're competing against guys like this. Guys who think this is an acceptable way to talk to another human being. Guys who post photos holding guns to their heads or show off their moldy apartments or can't even be bothered to wear a shirt for a single photo. And then when women don't respond enthusiastically, you all decide we're the problem." Derek was still staring at my phone, even though I'd locked it by now. He looked genuinely shaken. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. I don't know what I thought. But you're right. This is bad. This is really bad. And the thing is," I continued, because apparently I was on a roll now and couldn't stop, "these guys probably don't even realize they're sabotaging themselves and every other man on these apps. They think they're being funny or edgy or authentic. They don't see how their behavior makes women defensive and exhausted before we even start talking to anyone. And then decent guys who might actually be worth dating, get lost in the noise because we're all just so tired of wading through the garbage that we give up." Jake nodded slowly. "I never thought about it from that angle. I just kept hearing other guys complain about not getting matches, and I assumed women were being too picky or shallow. But if this is what you're picking from..." "Exactly," I said. "So when you say men are oppressed on dating apps, what you really mean is that men are their own worst enemies. Because for every guy who's genuinely trying, there are 10 guys poisoning the well for everyone else. The rest the afternoon was weird. Word had spread about what happened, because of course it had, and I got a mix of reactions from my coworkers. Some of the women came up to me privately and shared their own horror stories from dating apps. Stories that made mine look tame. Stories about men who became aggressive and hostile when they were rejected. Men who sent explicit photos without consent. Men who lied about everything from their age to their marital status to their employment. One woman told me about a guy who showed up to their first date with his mother and expected her to be fine with it. Some of the men looked uncomfortable, like they'd been called out by association. A few seemed defensive, like they wanted to argue but didn't quite dare after what had just transpired. But a few, like Jake and Derek, seemed genuinely thoughtful, like maybe they were rethinking some of their assumptions. Derek pulled me aside at the end of the day. "I know this was super inappropriate and probably violated about 12 different workplace policies," he said, keeping his voice low. "But I'm not going to write you up or anything. I think I needed to see that. We all did. So I'm not fired?" I asked, only half joking. "You're not fired," he confirmed. "But maybe let's keep phones with dating apps away from office hours from now on, yeah?" "Deal," I agreed. As I was packing up to leave, Jake came by my desk. He looked embarrassed, which was fair. "Hey," he said. "I'm sorry about earlier. I was being an idiot." "You were," I agreed, but I smiled to take some of the sting out of it. "But at least you learned something." "I did," he said. "I'm going to go home and look at my own profile tonight. Make sure I'm not being one of those guys." "That's a good start," I said. The whole experience left me thinking about a lot of things. About how men and women can exist in such different realities, even when they're ostensibly participating in the same activities. About how easy it is to make assumptions about other people's experiences without actually understanding them. About how the loudest, worst examples of any group tend to define the whole group in people's minds. But mostly, I thought about the guy who sent that message. The seemingly normal one. I wondered if he sent that message to every match, like some kind of bizarre opening line he thought was clever. I wondered if he'd ever actually gotten a positive response. I wondered if he had any idea that he'd just become a teaching moment for two men who'd previously believed that dating apps were systematically biased against men. Should I have pulled up my dating app at work? Absolutely not. Should I have involved my manager in this little social experiment? Definitely not. Was it a completely inappropriate use of office time and resources? 100% yes. But did it change minds? Did it open eyes? Did it make at least two men reconsider their assumptions about what women experience in the dating world? Yeah, it did. And honestly, that felt worth it. Later that evening, after I'd gotten home and changed into comfortable clothes and poured myself a generous glass of wine, I opened Tinder again. Part of me wanted to delete it, to just give up on the whole enterprise. But another part of me was stubborn. Why should I let the bad experiences drive me away from potentially meeting someone great? So I kept swiping. Past the shirtless selfies and the fish photos and the guys holding guns and the ones with women in their pictures and the ones whose bias were just height requirements. Past all of it, hoping that somewhere in this digital wasteland, there might be someone worth talking to. But now, at last, when men try to tell me about how hard they have it on dating apps, I have a story to share. I have evidence. I have two witnesses who went from believers in the male oppression narrative to understanding the actual reality. And I have a screenshot of "you gon' let me fuck" that I will treasure forever. Because sometimes, the best way to win an argument isn't with words or statistics or logical debate. Sometimes, you just need to hand someone your phone and let them see for themselves. Sometimes, you need to let people experience, even secondhand, what you've been trying to explain all along. So to every woman out there who's tried to explain to a man what dating apps are really like and been met with skepticism or dismissal, I see you. I believe you. And I have scientific evidence now that we're not exaggerating. We're not being too picky. We're not the problem. The call is coming from inside the house, gentlemen. Your biggest enemies in the dating world are the other men who make us want to delete every dating app and become hermits who only interact with our pets. Do better. Please, for the love of everything, do better.